Blog Talk Radio.
And welcome to the MaxBoxing.com's The Next Round. I'm your host, Gabriel Montoya. I should be joined here shortly by Steve Kim of MaxBoxing.com. I'm not sure if I have him on the line. Steve, are you there with us yet?
Gabe, I'm just going to say it right now. First of all, apologies to everyone that's been waiting for this show, but yes, please call this a comeback because we've been gone away far too long. But I just want to let everyone know this is the new formatted and hopefully improved, bigger and longer version of the next round. We've been gone for a while, but we promise to be back. And I think the bottom line is it's just good to be back talking to our fans. And if you want to ask us any questions, hit us up on our various Twitter accounts, and also you can call in, and Gabe, you can give that number later. And I think, Gabe, we've kind of decided we're going to have this show usually on Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern, correct?
Yes. I think that's our agreed upon time.
All right. Let's get right to it, Gabe. The big announcement last week before we get into the fights that are taking place on both HBO and Showtime, Mayweather, Saul Alvarez, it is a done deal, in the words of Richard Schaefer, Golden Boy CEO, signed, sealed, and delivered September 14th at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Gabe, be honest, are you surprised this fight got consummated?
No, actually. They seem to be in a little bit of a panic mode. I mean, I'm a little bit surprised, but when you look at the weight and you look at the money that they lost on that the Guerrero fight, it doesn't seem that surprising. I think everybody kind of scrambled a little bit and said, look, we don't want to get into a Tyson situation where we're taking really bad fights on guaranteed money. Let's get a little bang for our buck. So I'm not that surprised, and honestly, I'm not that excited.
Wait a minute. You're not that excited. Why aren't you excited? This is the biggest fight that could be made financially in boxing, at least in the United States. It's the fight that I think the large majority of boxing fans were yearning for. And I think the whole specter of Floyd Mayweather perhaps taking on Amir Khan or Devin Alexander, I think scared everybody involved. You seem to be in the minority, Gabe. Why are you not excited about this event, which may be the biggest pay-per-view event since May 5th, 2007?
There's no question of all of that. But I also find it to be one of the least dangerous fights there. The 152, I think, for a guy that is struggling to make weight, he looks like he's struggling to make weight the way he fights. Reminds me a lot of Miguel Cotto at 140, where he really picks and chooses his spots, and he doesn't ever really truly go for broke, Alvarez. And I think it's because he's kind of meeting out his energy. Now he's being brought down to 152, and I know that's only like a pound and a half difference from what he weighed in his last fight, but when a guy's looking around for a strength and conditioning coach, you know he's having trouble maintaining the weight. This is the fight they wanted, and they had to stay at this weight. But his experience level is less than Fernando Vargas was, and we thought he was too green heading into his fight with Felix Trinidad. He'd fought Winky Wright, he had a title, and he'd beaten Ike Corte handily, and yet he was too green. I didn't even think Canelo beat Austin Trout. It was a really close fight. He doesn't do two things at once. He's either on defense or he's on offense. He doesn't use one to set up the other. His feet are slow as death. He's only 22 years old. I'm just not that impressed by Canelo. I think his star is great. I think his potential is great. But this might end up being a little bit more like Salvador Sanchez versus the Professor in Sanchez's last fight, where you saw glimpses of greatness, but really, ultimately, it's going to be dominated by Floyd Mayweather. I'm not sure how excited I can be about that.
Well, let's put it this way. If we get that type of fight, or Salvador Sanchez was taken to the brink in 13, 14 rounds, I believe, at the Madison Square Garden, we should all be very thankful. I don't think there's any doubt, Gabe. A lot of what you say is true. However, this is the fight the public wanted, and they delivered. And let's get this issue out of the way. Is Floyd Mayweather a hypocrite for basically asking and receiving a catch weight? Absolutely. There's no doubt about it, based on the rhetoric that he spewed last year and taking not-so-veiled shots at Manny Pacquiao that, hey, I like to fight guys where they're comfortable, and I don't do catch weights. Well, first of all, he did his own catch weight that he did on the fly against Juan Manuel Marquez. And second of all, Miguel Cotto, he fought last year at 154. Now it's at 152. There's no arguing that. But, Gabe, I've been reading some of the stuff you've been saying on Twitter. You do seem to have a bigger problem than, let's say, I do, than I do as it relates to the catch weights. Just my personal opinion, catch weights are here to stay. They've been a part of boxing history for a very long time, and to get this fight done, you needed to do a catch weight, or possibly we were going to have two separate entities in Canelo and Mayweather who simply were not going to fight, maybe ever, if that issue was never resolved.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, but we also have a two-time belt holder. I mean, he also beat De La Hoya at 154 for a belt, and he beat Cotto. So I guess when things are a little more evenly matched, Floyd doesn't want it. And I guess you could say he's a hypocrite, but then, I mean, you look at his history, and he kind of changes with the weather in terms of how he feels about things. So it's kind of hard to really hold him to anything. And he's a promoter. So as all promoters are, they're kind of, inherently liars. They're going to say whatever it is that's going to sell this particular fighter in this particular situation. And I think you're right. When you look at it, I can say I'm not crazy about the catch weight, and I'm not crazy about catch weights in the sense that they ruin the lineage of the sport or they damage the belt. I'm just not that much of a purist. To me, it was more about if you want to move up to 154 and challenge for this guy's belt, or if you even want to call it a challenge, then fight at 154. I mean, the kid's skills are not so overwhelming, and his size isn't so overwhelming that you're not going to be able to handle him. Floyd always says weight doesn't win fights. So why should it matter now that this kid's going to grow in 20 pounds? To me, a guy that gains 20 pounds is a guy that's starving himself to make his weight, and that's not a good thing for him. I think all that was advantageous already to Floyd. But, it's Floyd's world. At least one of the worlds in boxing belongs to him. So it is what it is. I'm not one of those guys that says I'm going to boycott it or, get my panties all in a bunch about it. I don't even wear panties. But to me, it's going to be a fun fight. I think a lot of people are going to show up. But I'm asking, I guess, the same question that I asked with Oscar and Floyd. Okay, the world is going to show up to see this fight. Is the fight going to be worth anything?
Yeah, that's the separate issue, Gabe. None of these fights, especially involving Mayweather, because of his style, his skill, and his temperament, has actually ever been what they've been hyped up to be. And that is a bit of a disappointment. And I don't want to hear that's because he's so good, because by that standard, guys like Tommy Hearns, Ray Leonard, Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali, because they were in great fights where they actually got touched up against other great fighters at the top of their skill level, then you're almost saying to a point that those guys are overrated. I mean, Gabe, about a month or two ago, I received a great publication put out by the Boxing News, 100 Greatest Fights of All Time. And I've been lucky enough to go to about 8 or 9 of these. And the one glaring omission that was in this book is that Floyd Mayweather is not involved in any of them. And to me, that there is a certain indictment on Mayweather that, yes, he's brilliant, yes, he's masterful, yes, he's the ultimate craftsman, but he's also been an unbelievable manager and matchmaker. And I do think there's a part of him that says that a guy like Canelo, who looks like he's bursting at the seams, waiting to go to 160, let's bring him down. He's a little bit green. Even with all those number of fights, he's still 22, and he still is not a fully developed fighter. I mean, Gabe, the way I see this fight going, I think that Canelo is much more technically sound and has a much better identity inside the ring than Robert Guerrero. I think he throws straighter punches. I think he has a much sharper jab, and I think he's better defensively. So in that sense, there's a reason why he didn't start off as an 11-1 underdog while he's only 2.5, which, to be honest, I think that is a very low price on Mayweather. I would hammer that number early and often if I could. But I do think the first half of the fight, Gabe, will have some difficulty for Mayweather because of the size and the strength. And the fact is, I do think Canelo does have good functional speed. Gabe, what I have a question is, based on his history where the kid seems to fade out a little bit in the second half of the fight, that's where I think Mayweather begins to pull away in this prize fight.
I think so. I mean, Canelo's got decent hand speed. And he throws straight punches, so he helps himself with that. His combinations, everything is crisp. Technically, I like him. His upper body's starting to move more. He's getting more fluid. I still find his feet incredibly slow. And by the 5th or 6th round with Trout, his mouth was open. He looked totally tired. And maybe he was hiding it. Maybe he's kind of learned to relax and rest and go through that. But to me, when people say the 152 pounds shouldn't matter, if it didn't matter, it wouldn't have been asked for. I think, Floyd was bleeding him a little bit. He knows he's going to struggle a little bit. And I think the big question will be, how does he recover? Because, Canelo's looking around for his strength and conditioning coach. And there's been rumors that he's asked about Heredia and Alvarez, who are the bigger names in the sport. But, you got guys like Luis Garcia, Darrell Hudson. There are plenty of other guys. Gavin McMillan is another guy that is emerging on the scene, and all of them seem to get results with their people. I'm curious to see what he does with that and how he recovers, because it's not just about how you make the weight, it's how you put it back on. If Canelo comes in 20 pounds heavier, and there's no weight cap on this, I'm going to say he had a bad camp. If he only moves up to like 165, then he did it the right way. And I think that's going to be very telling in the back end of the fight. He'll be dangerous early, but I still think that it's going to be Matador and Bull, and he's going to wait around a long time and try to counterpunch and do things like that. And because I think his temperament is more of a counterpuncher than really a leading brawler. That's going to be a problem for him against a guy like Floyd Mayweather.
Gabe, very simply put, we don't know what the real pay-per-view numbers are. We all have our various sources. We've all been told the same thing. But Showtime and Mayweather and Golden Boy Promotions is never going to really fess up to the real numbers because, quite frankly, they don't have to, and that's not the protocol within this business. But I'm led to believe, and based on the fact that this fight was made, and I think there was a sense of urgency to make Canelo Mayweather sooner rather than later, would you say that consumer indifference to May 4th made September 14th a reality?
I think without question, yeah. That was, I don't know. There's two thoughts of it. The fact that we're getting the fight does seem to me that they're scrambling a little bit, that they really needed to make a fight. They couldn't do 2 in a row that nobody gave a damn about, or they might not get to 3. So there's that. But I think also there's kind of you have to spend money to make money, and there's 6 fights here. They're going to be developing this brand, the Mayweather brand, Heyman fighters and Golden Boy all together at Showtime over these 6 fights. So I was a little surprised that they just went right to this card. But I think it's a way of quality control over at Showtime and saying, look, we can't just accept everything that you're going to bring us, and you're going to bring us more Guerrero or Devin Alexander. That would have been horrible. Even Amir Khan, people are asking about that, and I just don't see. He'd have to really look fantastic at 147 in order for me to ever think that he had a shot. Even then, I don't think he has any sort of shot at Floyd.
Dave, here's what I think. I think, to me, that they face this reality, that the rumors are out about the relatively low numbers that May 4th did, and relative to a point that it's a great number if you take away the fact that the main event participants totals about 35.5 million. At that point, the mathematics of that equation made that event a financial disaster, if you believe those numbers. I think that there was a growing backlash based on the fact that the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight, no matter who you blame for that fight not being consummated, was now going to be added on to the fact that if Mayweather and Golden Boy did not make a Canelo fight in conjunction with Showtime, I think anyone short of Canelo Alvarez for this next Mayweather fight, whether it was in September, October, November, or December, if it was some sort of combination of Devin Alexander or Amir Khan, I think whatever the number was for Robert Guerrero, and let's say it's 850 to 900,000, I think you would have seen a 10 to 15% decline from that number. I don't think there's any doubt that there was an absolute necessity to make this fight happen for September 14th, because it's one thing to have a lost leader game, but if you believe those reports in Forbes magazine that they lost anywhere from 10 to 12 million on this event, and you're doing that twice a year, Gabe, there's lost leaders and then there's financial disasters. And I think, again, as I go back to my original point, consumer indifference and the fact that the power of the people, of the consumers, they made this an absolute reality. And I think in many ways, boxing wins. Now, will we get a competitive prize fight, Gabe? Judging by what you're saying, you think it's another easy mark for Floyd Mayweather.
I do. I think maybe, 3 or 4 rounds, and he Canelo's not exactly a mystery. You know, he's going to try to land the right hand. He maybe will mix it up, throwing leads as opposed to hiding it behind the jab, but he does rip to the body. But I just think he needs to have you right in front of him to set those leaden feet down and then begin punching. He's not exactly light on his feet. I think Floyd's going to take advantage of that. It's a risk, but it's a very, very calculated risk, and I think experience is going to be a big key here. Canelo is not a guy that's hit the canvas. He's not really been completely behind on the cards, and we have to see him really step it up to win. Everything's kind of gone his way. I'm really curious, too. Maybe you would know this number offhand. Can you think of a time when a guy's basically been in his first main event pay-per-view against a guy that's as experienced as a Floyd Mayweather and won?
No, and that is another factor. I mean, listen, I think Canelo is the most important fighter post-Mayweather and Pacquiao. I said that back on the day of April 20th because I was there at the Alamodome in San Antonio, and to see that huge throng and to see the electricity, and Gabe, I was there for about half a week, and to see a major city like that as enthralled with the fight and to be as engaged in a promotion as they were for about a week or two, it really opened my eyes about how important Canelo was. And that's why I thought they had two choices here. Number one, they had some sort of financial leverage, if not the whole leverage, on Mayweather because Mayweather needed a strong B-side, because that's another issue. You can beat Floyd Mayweather, but this is not a concert, as Kathy Duval would say. Even Oscar De La Hoya, his pay-per-view numbers fluctuated based on who he fought. I mean, when he fought Trinidad, he was doing about $1.4 million. When he did Yori Boy Campus, he did about 1/4 of those numbers. So it absolutely matters, the dance partner. But I also thought, if you're Canelo, you want to continue to build your brand, and you may be put into a disadvantageous situation like fighting at 152, but I think the kid is very precocious. That's one thing that I do admire about Canelo Alvarez. Number one, he took himself off the May 4th undercard, and then he basically said to Golden Boy and everyone else involved, I don't give a damn what you think. I'm going to go fishing for trout, and I'm going to have my own event, and I'm going to have $10 tickets, and he upped his own value. And that is where I do give the kid credit. He's not acting like a manager. He is risking greatness. And, Gabe, we have a tweet here from a very bright guy, Iron Mike Gallego, who points out to us, guys, quote, not only did the numbers come up short, the Guerrero main event was a snooze. They needed a huge name.
Without question, yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty on the money. I mean, for me, I mean, if they lost $20-30 million, or $10 to $12 million, again, I think sometimes you have to spend money to make money, but they couldn't afford to do the huge media blitz all over again and put a guy on there that we just absolutely knew Floyd would lose to. I think, for quote unquote, boxing experts like ourselves, we can break down the fight and go, okay, it's not going to be that great or it's going to be one-sided. But to the general public, the people that filled that stadium, in the Alamodome, the guys that love Canelo, the guys that love Floyd and live vicariously through him, they're all over this fight, and they love it, and they see it as an absolute challenge. So
Gabe,
I think it's going to do huge numbers.
Gabe, you know how much buzz this fight has is when this story was broken, I believe, last Wednesday or Thursday, I was just about to get out from the office when someone told me that, hey, Mayweather announced on his Twitter account that this fight is done. First of all, that stunned me. I'll be the first to tell you that. When Mayweather, he essentially broke that story. And when I started formulating the story, making various phone calls and giving few updates on Twitter, my timeline has never blown up like that, even during a fight when it's the most active. And I was asked to do like the national radio show, Doug Gottlieb, with I believe it was Yahoo Sports Radio or CBS Sports Network Radio. For a fight, think about this, Gabe, 4 months away. That, in many respects, is unprecedented.
Yeah, you're seeing people already doing their preview pieces on the major sites and talking about this thing. I think it's going to be a very, very good thing for boxing. I hate to be that one negative guy that's like, I'm not that into the fight, but I'm not. Fights have to hit you kind of viscerally, but I understand the importance to the sport. I think it's a very good thing, and it's at the same time, I mean, for me, it just feels undercooked. Like if Alexander Bradley was microwaved, this is kind of like raw. But
so this is sashimi, is what you're telling me.
Yeah.
This is some sort of Japanese restaurant where they're throwing a slab of fish right in your face and throwing some rice and some seaweed around it. Okay. Gabe, we have a tweet here from RGTZ54, and not to overshadow everything, because there's a lot of boxing that's taking taking place in between now and September 14th. But he asks, guys, any clue on who the real Miguel Cotto is fighting next? Will it be against a top contender, or will it be a tune-up? Gabe, I'll say this right now. Richard Schaefer told me about 2 weeks ago that they are putting a hold, which is just a very loose reservation on the Barclays Center for late September. The name that's cropping up now is K9 Bundridge. Gabe, am I nuts for thinking with K9 Bundridge's size, strength, and awkwardness, that is a horrific fight for Cotto at this stage of his life?
It's just a horrific fight, period. But yeah, I think it's a funky fight. I mean, I guess the alternative, he could fight Ishe Smith, but that would be. I actually don't think that would be a good fight for Cotto. I think he'd get picked apart. But Bundridge is a big, strong, muscular guy. He's awkward. I don't really understand it. I've never really considered Cotto much of a 54. I don't know why he would cherry pick or pick that guy. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, Miguel Cotto, to me, the most sense would be waiting for the winner of Ishe Smith-Carlos Molina. They are fighting for Ishe Smith's IBF title, I believe, July 19th, and that'll be in Las Vegas as a special edition of Showbox or special mini Showtime Championship Boxing edition, because these belts matter. I mean, one of the reasons why, in fact, the main reason why, Cotto and Gabby, his advisor, who I think should be sued for malpractice for some of the advice he's given, the reason why they took on Austin Trout is because Austin Trout had a WBA belt. So it'll be interesting to see what actually transpires with Miguel Cotto. Here's another tweet from @JE824. Any word on Mike Alvarado's return date, if any, this year? I can tell you this, Gabe and Jaime, what I've been told is that HBO and Top Rank are working on a late September, mid-October return date in Denver, Colorado, and various names have been thrown around, like Ruslan Provodnikov, who I'm not sure Top Rank wants any part of right now, or a guy, and I hate to say it because he's an agony fighter to watch, is Kareem Mayfield, because there's a reason why they signed him. But, Gabe, every few months I get an email or two from people in the 303 area code that always told me about some of the quote-unquote issues of Mike Alvarado in Denver. I don't know if where there's smoke, there's fire, but I do know the past of Mike Alvarado. Too much free time has never been good for Mile High Alvarado.
No, and I'm not. I mean, I think if you built a guy in his hometown and he's a massive draw there, then you should fight him there. But just because the guy wants to have the homecoming fight, sometimes those can be nightmares. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants tickets. All your buddies hang out. You're training at home. Everything's a comfort zone as opposed to going off to a training camp. I think sometimes the homecoming fight can be a huge nightmare. And coming off the momentum that he's got off this Rios fight, I think a stay-busy opponent in a safe environment is just what the doctor ordered for him. I think he earned a fight at home without question, but like you said, with that history, I'm not sure how much of a good thing that is. But we'll see. Maybe he's learned from his time, inside and from the fights that he's gone through. That all those stories could be the past. I don't know. I don't know how updated those emails are.
I actually got one this weekend. So
well, there you go.
I was not all that surprised because if you know enough people around the situation, Mike Alvarado is always one bad night away from ending back behind bars. I hate to be that clear about it and that dark about it, but that is the reality. There is a certain history and a precedent with Mr. Alvarado. Gabe, let's go to the show this Saturday at the Home Depot Center in Carson, which is actually now called the StubHub Center. I think a very entertaining tripleheader brought to you by Showtime. Welterweights in action. Marcos Maidana takes on Josecito Lopez. Junior middleweight Mayweather takes on Alfred Angulo. And then a junior middleweight developmental fight for Jermel Charlo takes on the veteran Demetrius Hopkins. Gabe, I want to say this right now. Saturday night, both HBO and Showtime have fight cards. I think if there's a fight that we're going to say, hey, that was the best fight of the night, my money all day, every day is on Maidana-Lopez.
Without question. This is, it's just going to be an action fight. And you could tell, I was talking to Robert Garcia at the press conference to announce the fight, and he was talking about, this is his third fight with Maidana, and he's not trying to turn him into a boxer, but he's trying to polish his gem, basically. He thinks he has better footwork than he's used. Watching him shadow box in the gym, he's like, I can do more with this guy. However, this isn't that fight. Josecito Lopez is a guy that as much as he's going to try to box, is going to be a guy that goes to war eventually. Maidana knows it. Garcia knows it. That's what everybody's expecting. And I think that this is going to be another in a long line of instant classics that happened at the Home Depot / StubHub Center. We've seen a lot of them there, and I don't expect this to be any different.
You know, Maidana is what he is. He is a fastball pitcher. He doesn't have a curveball, doesn't have a changeup, doesn't have a screwball. He's throwing high, hard heat all the time. And he comes at you in one speed. He's very monotone. I actually think Josecito Lopez has more dimensions. He's a taller, leaner guy. He's got good length. He could box a little bit. He could punch a little bit. But, you know, it's one of those situations in one of these fights where the guy with the definitive strength, that one hammer, the eraser, I think has the advantage. Here's the way I see the fight going, Gabe. I think Lopez hangs in there. I think he wins the first half of the fight, and I think he's going to have to hold on from dear life from this locomotive from Argentina. My heart says Lopez, but you know what? I just been talking to people and seeing them. I'm going to take Maidana to come on late to win this fight.
I kind of see a similar pattern. I watched a lot of fights of his over the weekend and heading into my story yesterday of Maidana's. And I think the technique has changed from Kotelnik to now. He doesn't have his hands as low. He keeps a higher guard. He used to kind of bend and twist his upper body too much, so he'd always be out of position. He's learning how to just move a few inches and be in position. And in watching that Khan fight, yeah, he was outspeeded and was getting outboxed in the first half of it, but he kept chipping away, getting in his shots where he could, and he eventually kind of almost hit pay dirt in that fight. And I expect that to be like this. He's got a hell of a chin. He's able to walk through things. He'll be able to deal with the speed and the movement of Lopez. And I think he pounds him out of there with a surprising body shot around the 8th or 9th round. I think Lopez will give a great account of himself. But I think Maidana is getting more and more comfortable at 147, and he's certainly getting more and more comfortable in Garcia's system.
Gabe, another factor. I thought Lopez, for being a relatively short fight, only 5 rounds, we don't know the residual effects of what that beating did at the hands of Saul Alvarez last September is going to have. He may never really be quite the same. I know that's a fatalistic view, but I have to tell you, last year, that was a Louisville slugger against a wiffle ball bat. That was as big a physical mismatch as you're going to see on the big stage as almost any fight at that level. And it was striking to see the difference in the disparity in size and strength between a true 154-pounder and Lopez, who to me is not even a full-fledged welterweight. I think he's a bit of a tweener. If there was a weight class of 143.5, Lopez would be outstanding. Unfortunately, there isn't one, and I think if there's a guy who's a better puncher at 147, I still think that's Maidana. I'm not counting Lopez out. I think he's a very live underdog here, but most boxing insiders are going with Maidana. Game, Lara Angulo. I know it's interesting. A lot of people are excited about this fight. Gabe, I'm going to be honest with you. I think stylistically it is an absolute nightmare for Angulo. I would be surprised if Angulo won more than 2 or 3 rounds. I like the Cuban big to outbox him conclusively.
Yeah, I just don't think it's a very good style for him, and it kind of shows the little divisions within that company. Angulo is with Golden Boy, but he's not with Al Heyman. Lara is with Golden Boy, but he is with Al Heyman. So he gets fed a style that really fits him. And the thing I'll say for Angulo is this: he's very tough. 2, it's his 3rd fight back, so I think he's shaken the rust. Certainly in his last fight on the last December on the Khan undercard, he shook some rust. But dealing with the speed of Lara, I don't think he's going to be terribly surprised. He might be outclassed, but he's going to be able to deal with it because of the stable that he's been dealing with. I know it's not exactly Murderer's Row, but he's dealing with Brandon Gonzalez and Fernando Guerrero, Amir Khan, guys that have a lot of natural speed and athleticism. And so it's not going to be shocking to him, I think, when he gets in there. I think he's going to have to walk through fire, and he's going to have to press Lara and really kind of muscle him, much the way Carlos Molina did. Do I think he's going to win? No, I don't. I think that Lara is going to outpoint him and probably have his way.
Gabe, I got to tell you, watching him last December, and I believe he fought an undersized welterweight by the name of Jorge Silva, very gutty Mexican, at the LA Sports Arena, and to see Angulo get tattooed over and over again, I mean, I was expecting candy to fall out of the bottom of him in certain rounds. He got hit so much. I find that to be alarming, and it's one thing to hang in there with sparring with 16, 18-ounce gloves and headgear, which is a very, very low level of intensity at times, and you're working on certain things. But when Lara is right and focused, we don't have to like his style. He's your classic Cuban stylist. Great amateur background, does not give 1 ounce about the fans, and they're going to do what they do consistently and stay within their philosophy. I see Lara looking very good. I think, to me, this is not batting practice. This is slow-pitch softball. And if Lara can't look good here, not good as in winning, good as in exciting, then it's hopeless. I like Lara to win big here and to really make a statement. And, Gabe, Charlo Demetrius Hopkins, I'll say this for Demetrius Hopkins, much like his uncle, and he's nothing like Bernard in this sense, doesn't have the physical toughness, does not have the pedigree or the overall talent. The one thing about Demetrius, though, he knows how to handle himself in the ring. I like both Charlo brothers. I actually think Jermall, the tall right-hander, has more of an upside, more of a ceiling. But I do think Charlo is developing, and I think on this Showtime opener, at the very least, he will get some quality rounds.
I think that's kind of what Hopkins is for at this point, is quality rounds. He's not a guy that he's lost, but he's never been stopped. And he's on a 3-fight winning streak against also Rans. But I think Charlo is. I wasn't terribly blown away by him in the early going, but the more he's gone along in his development, the better I think he's going to be. And the more I've been a little more impressed each time. I'm not completely on the bandwagon, but I like what I see. So I expect this to be something of a distance fight. If Charlo gets him out of there, I'll be really impressed. But these are much-needed rounds.
Yeah. Gabe, let's get back to the Twitter timeline. The Iceman from San Antonio, a good friend of mine, at 210_Rod1 has a question. He says, if the machine, Lucas Matthysse, gets past Danny Garcia, and he says Matty by KO, do you see an Ortiz-Floyd rematch? Vic all over the TV, if Ortiz can win, maybe versus Guerrero. I'll say this right now. Victor Ortiz, from what I've been told by sources close to him, Gabe, that jaw is still not healed correctly, and he had to go to multiple doctors to get cleared, at least 2 from what I've been told. So until we actually see him in the ring, I don't think we should be making any plans for Victor Ortiz.
No, I've been saying this for a while, and I hate to be grim about it, but I think he's done. That jaw.
He's done isn't finished completely.
I think so. I mean, every time I see him, that jaw doesn't look good. And, when he talks, it doesn't sound like he's the most passionate about coming back. And he was a bit of a reluctant guy. We've heard that in the gym before he was ever, stopped or injured like this. That little things he would kind of make, excuses to get out of sparring. I don't see him coming back. I really don't. I'd be very surprised if he ends up coming back.
But, well, if Face Lube is doing as well as he expected, I mean, he could just live as a facial moisturizer tycoon for the next 50 years, I guess, and you are right about that. He's never struck me as a guy that needed boxing or had a particular passion for it, and but again, I think boxers have to learn one thing, and I remember Carlos Palomino learned this way back when I was a kid. Carlos Palomino retired at the height of his skills and talent, thinking, okay, I'm going to step away from boxing and become an actor and do other things. Gabe, as soon as he retired and he lost that cachet of being a world-class prize fighter, guess what? All of that dried up, so there is a certain reality. Gabe, you have a tweet. Go ahead.
This is from Jimmy, who's at Palooka Villain on Twitter. He says, what are our thoughts on Garcia Matthysse in L.A. and the battle for that date between Golden Boy and Top Rank?
I got 2 words, Cold War. I don't know what else to really say except ad nauseum this has gone on. First of all, September 7th, in talking to someone at Top Rank, they feel as though they have that date with Chavez against supposedly Brian Vera. And Golden Boy has what they call a secondary hold, which I think is a fancy way of saying if Chavez flakes out, which is very possible, then we get that date. But I will say this, as much as I like Garcia Matthysse, it's one of the fights I'm absolutely looking forward to, and I hope that it happens. I really believe that fight belongs on the East Coast. I'm a big proponent, and I'm an advocate of fights happening where they belong. And Gabe, do you see Garcia Matthysse belonging 5 blocks from us? Let's be honest about it. No.
I think, people got a little upset. I saw some East Coast writers kind of bitching and moaning about this fight in L.A.
I agree with them, by the way.
You do agree with them. I don't know. I mean, granted, as a brown person, I don't, just because a guy's Latin, I don't jump on him. I don't necessarily run out claiming, Puerto Ricans from Philadelphia or Argentinians, But I think if you stack the card correctly, I don't know, maybe I'm just being selfish because I live in California and it'd be easy for me to get to the fight. But I think you could stack the card. Would they do any better together in D.C., do you think, than they would in L.A.?
If you put Lamont Peterson, who is a proven draw at a certain level, okay, and let's say you do Zab Judah, which I still think is an entertaining fight, you don't think that a Zab Judah Lamont Peterson as the semi-main and maybe stick on Gary Russell with a live breathing body for once, or a Seth Mitchell, or maybe some other guys from D.C., like maybe an Anthony Peterson, along with that fight, you don't think that does better in D.C. than it would in L.A., Gabe?
Yeah, I could see that if you stack it that way. Although I kind of wonder how many people are going to come out after seeing Lamont get blown out in his last fight. But I mean, couldn't you counter that with in L.A. with an Abner Maris fight? Do you think he's not? And I'm actually asking this not to be devil's advocate, but your honest opinion. Do you think he's actually been built to a point where you could put him underneath that card and it would draw people there, or do you think he's just not been developed yet?
Listen, we were there ringside when Abner Maris fought Anselmo Moreno. And how many real tickets did they sell? I think they sold about, maybe 4,000 or 5,000? I mean, again, I love Abner Maris. He is a fighter's fighter. He's a fan favorite in many respects, but he is not what I would call an A-side marquee attraction. And from a Staples Center perspective, this is a little bit, I would say, awkward because they are corporate partners, and I think they have an interest in Golden Boy, right? And they obviously have a very good working relationship with Top Rank. So they have two events here and two pretty good fights. Now, I'm going to say it right off the bat, and I said it when the story came out on Sunday on Boxing Scene. In my opinion, Matthysse Garcia is infinitely better than a return fight for Chavez from a pure prize fighting standpoint, okay? But which event does better? And as a venue, you want the event that has more people in the seats. And that would clearly be Chavez Jr., even against Brian Vera. And I think that's one of the issues. But by the way, Gabe, are you convinced Danny Garcia is going to go through with this commitment and face the machine?
No. I mean, it's kind of interesting sitting there. It reminded me when Matthysse blew up Peterson, it reminded me of that old poker joke that if you're looking around the table wondering who the sucker is, it's you. And Danny Garcia is sitting there, and he's been kind of treated like he's the man. He's the man at 140. And then you see Matthysse just blow right through Lamont Peterson. And you have to, if I'm Danny Garcia, I'm thinking, wait a minute, am I the A side or am I the B side? And I think, in explaining to my lady, like how you determine who an A side is, eventually it's going to be tickets and everything. But say you got two guys that are kind of similar in skill, but one of them doesn't have one punch knockout power and the other one does. Well, there's your A side. And I just think that, I don't know, if I'm Danny, I'm kind of rethinking things. And maybe I don't want that fight. Maybe I want to build to it and work some other way as opposed to going straight to him. But he's going to have to fight him sooner or later. I'll be really surprised. But again, Heyman's pulling all those strings, so we'll see what he wants to do.
Heyman either signed Matthysse to steer Matthysse away from Danny Garcia and to play Machiavellian, the puppet master, and to make sure that Matthysse gets the best available paydays regardless of who he fights, or he's done what Bob Arum and Don King have done for years, is to have both ends so that regardless of what happens, he's always in the W column. And we're going to find out. I mean, Richard Schaefer delivered on September 14th, and he told me and some other reporters, I believe that fight is going to happen on September 7th. He's put it at 90%. So we'll take him at face value, but let's make this very clear. And, Gabe, I hate when people say that fighters are afraid or they duck because many times that simply is not true. It's the boxing business and circumstances getting in the way of fights happening, whether it's a network affiliation or promotional disputes. So I don't think fighters really duck each other. But, Gabe, in this particular instance, if Danny Garcia, since he is not fighting Floyd Mayweather September 14th, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, swims like a duck, and ducks Lucas Matthysse, it's a duck. Simple as that. I don't think there's any defending it if Danny Garcia weasels his way out of a fight with Lucas the Machine Matthysse. All right, well, let's get to our next tweet. Gabe, I don't know if you're still there or not, but
yeah, I was on mute answering you. I'm really curious to see how Danny Garcia's ribs are doing. We'll find out. I agree with you though. If he skips this and goes to the club, then yeah, without question, it's a duck and probably a new dance.
Gabe, from Sweet Science 559, the big question is, guys, will you be at the fights this weekend? All I can say is, for me, is the Pope Catholic. When there's fighting going on at the tennis court at the Home Depot Center, I will absolutely be there. For those who have not been there, make sure you can one day, because it is a great venue. It's very cozy. And I know it's a tired cliche, but, Gabe, you've been there. There literally is not a bad seat in the house.
No, it's my favorite venue, without question. I mean, I really love the Memorial Auditorium up in Sacramento. It's kind of the same kind of feel. You sit in the balcony and look over, but there's something about that environment out there that just breeds great fights. The crowd is in this kind of bowl. It's like a little gladiator arena. I've seen so many good fights there, and yeah, I'll be there this weekend without question. This is. I'm moving, in about a month here, so I'm going to enjoy as many Southern California fights as I can, and certainly this one. I can't wait.
Gabe, on HBO, we have a doubleheader from the Bell Center in Montreal for the light heavyweight title. Chad Dawson takes on Adonis Stevenson, and the opener is the WBA interim lightweight title between Yuri Gamboa and Darly Perez, who has made it safely into Canada, clearing up any visa issues. Gabe, does Chad Dawson get a bit of a raw deal in this sense? And again, I don't want to sound like I'm Chad Dawson's fan club president, but I think he takes way too much heat for A, losing to a very, very good fighter on Andre Ward, and B, this is what really bothers me. When people say that Chad Dawson quit in that fight, let me tell you something, folks. If you listen to some of the people that knew what happened in that camp as he cut weight, essentially getting knocked out by Edison Miranda about 2 or 3 weeks from that fight, and I can make an argument he shouldn't have been cleared to fight at 168. Gabe, I think he was perfectly justified in calling it a day when he did against Andre Ward back in September.
I think people, really threw him on the scrap heap. And again, it goes back to the fans. They just play kind of fantasy boxing sometimes. And, Chad, as much as he said it, and Ice Scully, as much as they said it, that the weight wasn't going to be a problem, we now know that it was a serious problem. He was dead on his feet. I'd like to take away from what Andre did, because Chad didn't have to go down there, and he made that decision. But yeah, I think people kind of throwing him on the scrap heap. He's a solid fighter. He's very technically skilled. Adonis Stevenson is a relatively young fighter, despite the fact that he's 35 years old. He's got that ridiculous power that's the great eraser, and I think it's very real power. But he could be outboxed. I think he could be pushed to the limit a bit. And we're going to see that. I think we could potentially see that this weekend. I'm personally picking Adonis Stevenson to knock him out in 6 or 8 rounds.
Really?
I am.
Whoa, hold on. Gabe, that surprises me. You really think a guy that's as untested and is as raw, and I would say one-dimensional, and yes, that dimension is the eraser. Now, my question to you is this then. Do you think Chad Dawson is that faded or damaged, or do you think that Adonis Stevenson is a real deal or a combination of both?
I think it's a little combination of both. Well, I think Dawson is looking to prove something, and that's always kind of dangerous when you're facing an athletic puncher like Stevenson. If he goes in there looking to get a pound of flesh early and trying to make a point, that's going to be when Stevenson is most dangerous, and that could be a problem. Now, if he plays it safe and really sticks the jab and uses everything to his advantage, being a southpaw, then I think he's going to be all good. I like Chad, and I picked him to upset Ward, and I believe in him as a fighter. But I think he's coming off of this. I think he should have had something in between in order to get that confidence back.
Gabe, are you forgetting who was TV packager? It's Gary Shaw. So let's get that thought right out of the way. And I'll say this about Chad Dawson. When people say he didn't have to go to 68, I disagree with that, Gabe. He had to though. Maybe not from Andre Ward specifically or Dan Goosen, but I've been told by very good sources that his team, and specifically Chad, was told by the network, HBO, which has hitched its wagon to Andre Ward, that if you fight Andre Ward, that we're not going to do a catch weight. You have to go all the way down to 68, fight for Ward's title, or there's no other options. So when people say he didn't have to go to 168, well, given the fact you're with Gary Shaw, who can't create his own date and subsists off a television license fee, I would say he really had no choice. And on the secondary part of that deal, he was told, win, lose, or draw, no matter how you perform, you will be back on our network. And, Gabe, you see Chad Dawson once again headlining on HBO. So I think all of that is true. I like Chad Dawson in this fight, Gabe. And, again, I could be completely wrong. Maybe he is damaged because I've always said from the first Glenn Johnson fight in 2008 where he got buzzed hard, and we had seen him on the canvas before against Eric Harding, he's never been quite the same. It wasn't quite as pronounced as Hector Camacho post-Edwin Rosario, but we know even at 75, he's not exactly Scrap Iron Johnson as it relates to the chin. But I think Adonis Stevenson is a sprinter. I think he gets off of the blocks quickly. I think he gets out of there fast. I think he has a great burst, but he's not a long-distance runner. And even in the Pascal fight, one thing that's overlooked, Gabe, did Dawson lose that fight? Yes, but I thought Dawson had turned the tide and was coming on. I think that unless your scenario plays out where Stevenson absolutely shocks him in the beginning, I think as the fight goes on, I think Dawson's class, if he's not completely damaged, will show. Gabe, I am going against you. I like Dawson by decision.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very possible. You know, you look at his fight with Donovan George. I mean, I think he did get pushed, and you're right. The stamina, you know, and guys that have done time, Bernard Hopkins notwithstanding, because it was well before like his career, you know. But like I'm thinking of like Clifford Etienne. Those guys are like they've never really had like the greatest stamina in the world, and he's a 35-year-old fighter. He's learning how to relax still. I mean, I think it was a big mental hump that Stevenson got over. I know it's only Darnell Boone, but to avenge his only loss, and that's his last fight, he stopped Boone in 6 rounds. I think that gives him a lot of confidence. He said that today. But I think the George fight, that really, and granted, it is Don George, but that's a quality, serviceable guy. And to hell that he kind of went through in that fight at times, I think that is a big leap forward. I mean, you have one guy coming off positives, and you have one guy, Chad Dawson, who's coming off a serious negative. You know, one guy on our Twitter account is saying that Chad's going to be gun shy, and that's what's going to get him knocked out. That's Dre Cade. I think that's going to be part of it, that he's not going to quite know what to do. He's also been very quiet this time around. So I'm curious. Chad, I don't think of him as a mental midget. I think of him as a mental enigma. He's a trippy guy.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. I mean, I think it's an interesting fight. I think this one, almost more than any of the others, can kind of go any way.
Mm-hmm. Iron Mike Gallego chimes in again. If Dawson can avoid falling into the Forrest Mayorga trap, he should box circles around Stevenson, which means he agrees with me. And obviously, Iron Mike Gallego is a boxing savant. Gabe, Yuri Gamboa. I don't know. I think he's one of the most overrated, overhyped fighters in the world today. I'm not saying he's not talented, but the way people talk about him in these mythical terms because of his Cuban background and the fact he scores spectacular knockdowns or knockouts and he's undefeated, you know, I'll grant you that. But at the same time, he hasn't faced Murderer's Row. He's been matched relatively soft, and he's hit the deck 7 times. And I want to talk about an enigma. This is a guy last year in line to beat Brandon Rios, and I think that version of Brandon Rios would have got absolutely whipped by a good Gamboa. And to me, he's a guy milking the system, looking for free paychecks, and this time in the form of 50 Cent. I'm sorry, I'm just not a fan of Gamboa. I think there's a certain authenticity to Guillermo Rigondeaux that's just not there with Yuri Orkis Gamboa.
You know, my very first episode with you on the next round back in Gary's house, I said it then and I believe it now. Yuri Gamboa is a knockout waiting to happen. I've never been on that train. I think he's really overhyped. He's one of those guys that if he can't get you out of there, he doesn't really have a lot of answers. He just kind of wanders in space, explodes in a few moments, and then gets out of there, and it's very, very boring. I don't think that Darley Perez is going to be the guy to expose him, but lesser guys have put down Gamboa. And Perez, he's a serviceable guy. He's gonna come in there with undefeated pride. Do I think he takes him to the wall? No, but it wouldn't really surprise me because I'm just not that big on the guy. I think he's a little bit chinny. He's got super short arms, like a T-Rex. I don't think he can go very high in weight. We're going to find out. And I got to be really, just to jump off to the side really quick. This Bosch character in this Miami PED clinic has agreed to work with MLB on their investigation. And Gamboa's name came up in there. So I'm really curious now that this guy's going to start. He's going to start talking. This Anthony Bosch or Tony Bosch from the Miami Biogenesis Clinic of America. Gamboa's name connected. I'm very curious to see the fallout there. Just a little side note.
Quick Twitter here. This is from I Am a Boxer 22. It says, "Can you find me a fight?" The simple, quick answer is no. We cover fights. We don't make them. Moving on. Let's see if we get another Twitter here. Let's go through some news and notes. Could it be? And I don't have the guts to go with this headline, but with Top Rank making inroads in Asia and they're signing Ryota Maruta, is it safe to say that Bob Arum is turning Japanese? Turning Japanese, I really think so.
I think so. It's very strange watching these two powerhouses, Golden Boy and Top Rank, go at it. Golden Boy is on a roll right now. They got their own network. They're going all UFC on everybody, having everything kind of in-house. And Bob's like, I think I'll just start moving out to Asia. My co-host on Leave It in the Ring, Dave, was like, he gets the feeling that they're kind of letting Golden Boy just kind of run in circles and do their thing in America, and Bob's just going to try to take the rest of the world. I'm not really sure what he's doing, but he's got, the biggest Asian name in the sport in Manny Pacquiao. He's kind of doing what Robinson did in taking, himself to Europe. They're taking Manny to Asia to kind of, put him out to pasture and get those last few dollars out of him. I'm not exactly sure what Bob's doing, but it seems all part of that plan.
Gabe, here's the thing. Top Rank still has some very, very good fighters, but the future is in guys like Oscar Valdez and Felix Verdejo, but that's about 2-3 years away. So in the meantime, this is why you sign Kareem Mayfield, because you need to create fights, you need to have opponents. I will say this about Ryota Maruta. He's a fan-friendly fighter. I think he has a much higher ceiling as a professional boxer than Zhao Shiming. Zhao Shiming, to me, I don't want to call him, the Chinese butterbean or the Asian Mia St. John, but it is a novelty in a sense that I don't think he's a really good professional prospect. He's already 32, and his style is just very difficult to watch. I don't ever see it translating into him being a real fighter, but I think there's a certain mileage you can get out of it. Now, Maruta, I think, has a chance. I saw some films on him. This guy boxes like a real professional. And so I actually think there's something to be said there, but I do think that you're right. Right now, in the U.S. market, it is Golden Boy / Showtime that is winning the battle, at least in terms of perception, and Top Rank has to find creative ways to stay afloat. Gabe, August 3rd, Kathy Duva called the hotline a couple of hours ago. She says that the August 3rd NBC Sports Network show will be Curtis Stevens against Saul Roman, Eddie Chambers on the card. Gabe, right now, I think Stevens is very valuable in this sense. If you look at both sides of the HBO Showtime debate, Peter Quillen and guys like Gennady Golovkin, they need opponents. I think Curtis Stevens is a guy that's going to be a valuable chess piece in about a year because, quite frankly, John the Beast Mugabe, he ain't walking through that door.
I agree with you. I think that's Kathy is one of those people that just knows how to take a gem, how to polish it, and really get the most out of it. And I always kind of say this, that you look at like the Gary Shaws, like the smaller promoters, and then you look at Kathy Duva, it's just they could learn a lot from what she does. She builds markets. She takes guys that other people think are, ready for the scrap heap, and she keeps going with them and gets something good out of them. I just want to clone Kathy. If we could just get more of her, that's what we need. It's something that you've always said. It isn't about best versus the best. The belts, it isn't about the 1 and 2 fighting each other or pound for pound. We need more promoters that create more markets and that do fights like this and take fighters like this and actually do something with them, as opposed to we were laughing just a few minutes ago. Chad Dawson doesn't get a tune-up before he takes on a big puncher and Adonis Stevenson because his TV packager doesn't roll like that.
Gabe, people that are going to poo-poo this fight, I think they're forgetting one thing. Curtis Stevens has not gotten a lot of rounds, to say the least, recently. And are they forgetting that this is not what I would call a great middleweight? He lost to Jesse Brinkley, people. This is a process in rebuilding the famed chin checker, okay? So I actually think this is a proper fight. Gabe, before we wrap it up here, we have to talk about this situation. Carl Froch beat Mikkel Kessler in a very good rematch a week or two ago. What do we do now with Andre Ward? I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not a big Andre Ward fan, as people may have figured out on Twitter. But I think someone needs to give him some good, sound advice and be honest with him. If he's going to stay at 68, the best, biggest option for him is a Froch fight in the UK. And I'll go on record as saying it right now. They could fight in the UK. They could fight in Atlantic City, Oakland, Pluto, Mars, the Milky Way. Andre Ward would always win that fight. But I think someone needs to be honest with them and tell him where he really stands in the boxing business.
I agree with you. And you look at history, and these guys talk about their skill and how great they are and this and that. And the bottom line, like I saw BJ Flores going crazy on Twitter about it and saying, the bottom line is that, Ward is the man and Froch is number two. But that's not really looking at the business of the sport. And one guy just had a massive fight. He's actually had two massive fights in a row, taking out Butte, taking out Kessler. And I thought that was a very close fight, and I would like to see a third one of those. But when you can do numbers the way that Froch has, and when your star has kind of risen the way his has, really who is number one and who is number two, despite the win? I mean, LaMotta and Robinson, they fought 6 times. And, LaMotta won one of those. They were all entertaining fights. I think at some point you have to look at the entertainment value and what money you can make if I'm Andre Ward with the guy that it might be an entertaining fight the next time around. I think Froch might go for broke. I honestly think he had a really bad night at the office against Ward.
You know what? But Gabe, listen, I'm not a Ward fan, but I'll say it. I think he always has a bad night at the office against SOG. I mean, I give the devil his due. I think the guy is very good at what he does. Do I find it entertaining? Do I find it enthralling? Would I pay 2 nickels for it? No. But I think he always shuts down Froch. With that being said, if you're going by a rating system, this is not like team sports where if you're a boring team that's in first place, you're in first place. In boxing, what your ability is to draw, whether it's on TV or at the live gate, means something. And I've always said, and I think you've agreed with me, and you've tried to talk some sense into some of those people over there, they should have stepped up to the plate and taken on Lucien Boutte in Montreal. But instead, Froch jumped to the line, and he restarted his career in many respects, Gabe.
I think without question. And if they're going to make the same, if Ward's team is going to make the same mistake twice, then they get what they deserve. Because they're kind of looking at the same thing. They looked at Boutte and said, well, who's he beaten? What does he prove? It's like, he sells out, dude. It's going to be a huge fight. Go do it. It's going to do great ratings. You're probably going to win. Just go do it. And if they look at this Froch 2 fight the same way and they pass, well, you know what? Then you deserve obscurity, quite honestly.
Yeah, and another issue is this. Coming up on September 7th, that was supposed to be his return date, Gabe. That's what HBO had planned on. That's what they were hoping for. And as you see now, it looks like it's going to go to Chavez. And I think HBO has to be relieved because on a night where they're going to have Matthysse Garcia maybe go against them on Showtime, they got themselves a much bigger event because, no, Chavez is not the fighter Ward is. He's about half the fighter, and he's about twice the draw. And that's the reality. We don't really know when Ward's going to come back because he's a very brittle guy. And, Gabe, I was told last month that his return was never going to be September 7th, that I actually think he may not fight till October, November.
Yeah, Virgil Hunter talked about, he's going to be ready to go in about 3 months. But I absolutely agree. If I'm HBO, I bring out my big gun. I bring out, supercharged Chavez Jr., who does great ratings. I don't take a chance on a stinky fight versus that slugfest that's going to be Matthysse Garcia. We got about a minute left.
Right, so that's it, folks. We are back, so please call it a comeback. And we want to apologize for the delays, but quite frankly, we haven't had the equipment, we haven't had the wherewithal, but we are going to start this up a full hour. Please, we invite you to call in, tweet in, and Gabe, so we're going to decide it right now. We're going to cast our stone right now that from now on, we're going to be on Monday
we'll actually take some calls. We had a couple people on hold, but we were in the middle of stories. But we'll take callers. We'll take more tweets. Yes, Mondays, 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern. We will be here every week.
All right, so on behalf of Gabriel Montoya and the rest of Max Boxing, folks, till the next round, goodbye, everybody.